Hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eliot Olson. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the trans, intersex, and non-binary program officer at the New Haven Pride Center. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the land on which we are hosting this event. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Shattuck, Golden Hill, Pawcatucket, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. Please take a moment to acknowledge the land that you are on and honor the Native people whose lands you occupy and the history of the place you are in. You can learn more about this history at native-land.ca. Thank you so much for joining us again today. A very happy Intersex Awareness Day to you all. Today we will be having a conversation with Anunnaki Marquez, who is an educator, an advocate, an activist for the intersex community. And we're going to be talking a little bit about their work and how we can all become better allies and advocates ourselves. So let's get the conversation going. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on Intersex Awareness Day.
Yeah, right. So if you want to introduce yourself, I know I did a little bit of an intro, but pronouns and how you kind of would describe yourself elevator pitch wise.
I am an intersex, non-conforming, androgynous gay man. My pronouns are he, they, but I rarely hear they, so I'm trying to get people to say they and them more often. It's kind of funny because I fought for he, him for so long now, I'm confusing everyone.
Awesome. So I am so happy that you're able to join me today to talk a little bit about your own work advocating for the intersex community, but also to give us a little bit of a debriefing because, at the Pride Center and more broadly in the queer and trans community, intersex isn't something that comes up a lot, and that's a really big oversight, at least in my mind. So I'm really excited not only to be talking about your own work, but also educating people a little bit about who's around them and who they should not be leaving out of the discussion.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to do this.
Oh yeah, for sure. So like, how long have you been advocating for the community? Like, I don't want to age anything, but how many years would you say?
I came into the intersex community in 2015 after speaking to Tiger DeVore and Hita Valoria and found out that how I had been born could be described as intersex traits. Up until that point, I called myself a disorder of sex development and didn't even know that congenital adrenal hyperplasia created a variation of intersex. It's a long story how we get pathologized, but so in short, I ended up at a Unitarian Universalist church after leaving the Catholic Church. When I went against my birth assignment, I was no longer very welcome. So my husband and I found the Unitarian Universalist Church, Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church in Florida. And they kept on telling me I needed to meet Dr. Judy Herring, that she did a TED Talk called Genderbound. And I was like, I don't want to meet no doctor. I had been harmed by doctors, and they insisted over and over and over and over again that I meet her. And to make a long story short, she was a true ally and had done this amazing TED Talk. And she's the one that catapulted me into realizing I had something to say to the world. So she urged me to create a blog. She urged me to do my first talk at UU with her, and it's grown since then. I've spoke probably over 30 times, plus my own TED talk.
Hmm.
Born Intersex Europe, We Are Human, and have since joined Intersex in Faith. But I was very, very green when I first started in 2015. Hida Valoria was like, "You will never call yourself a disorder of sex development again." And I'm like, "Yes." I'm not arguing. It's like, no more. And I truly had to turn my whole way of thinking around about myself and about others. And then
Hmm.
when I found out about how horrendously Pigeon Pagonis had been violated, there was just no going back. I realized that as a person that had escaped genital mutilation, that I really did need to let the world know that we're lovable, that we could get married, that we could have families, that we could be successful without all these horrific surgeries being forced on us.
Yeah. There's so many directions to go into because you mentioned just like all good. I suppose, and you kind of already started talking about this. But one of my next questions was going to be, why you decided to dedicate yourself so fully to this work, and it's become more than a passion, right? This is professional for you, and I'm wondering, is it education? Is it fighting for certain rights? Um, like I know you are, I think, the first person in Colorado um, to receive a birth certificate. Um, and I hope I could say that was on your website and everything. So,
Yeah, in 2017, I do believe it was Sarah Kelly Keenan. Well, I know it was Sarah Kelly Keenan that got the first intersex birth certificate in New York City, and soon followed Hida Valoria.
mm,
And I thought it was going to be pretty easy, but then I learned that it's the United States, and that each state works
yeah.
individually. So it didn't make a darn bit of difference the success that New York City had. I was on my own as a pioneer.
Hmm.
So after 18 months of fighting for my intersex birth certificate, that included the Board of Ethics of a Catholic hospital, included going to the court in Florida to
Yeah.
get an order for Colorado to honor this, took MRIs, CAT scans, blood work, all this horrible stuff. Um, 18 months later, I finally got my intersex birth certificate, September 17th, 2018, and it was actually signed by the governor. And forgive me, but I can't remember what the governor's name was at that time. Shame on me for not knowing that. I should
No, no.
have his name memorized. But, we lived in Florida at the time. And I mean, it was huge for me because, believe it or not, when I first came into the intersex community,
Hmm.
um, since I have so much intersectionality with transgender men, as we'll talk about later,
Hmm.
I was actually being called a poser by some people.
Mm.
So to get that intersex birth certificate not only was a huge step in showing Colorado that parents could choose this birth certificate if they wanted, it
Hmm.
also was a way of saying, "Hey, guess what, people? I am not a poser. I'm the real deal."
Hmm. I can't see anyone who would call you a poser. That's just nonsense.
I've done an awful lot of work proving otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so I'm wondering, before we dive into some of the larger topics, like the overlaps between like the queer and trans community and the intersex community, and differences of being out, and some battles going on for the intersex community, if there were any like base statistics you could share with us. I know a little bit, having watched the TED Talk, but for the audience sakes as well, I want to make sure that everyone understands how many people out there who are intersex, and it's not as rare as you really think.
No, we're actually not rare at all, and that actually shocked me even when I
Hmm.
learned about different things. The the typical statistic that we hear is 1.7%. Sometimes it's stretched to 2%. I mean, 1.7 to
Yeah.
2%. So if the world population is 7.9 billion, that's over 134 million people are intersex. And what you hear often is that's as common as people with red hair. So every time you see a redhead, you could imagine you could be seeing intersex people. The thing with intersex, though, some of us don't even know we're intersex, or like like how I used to be. I didn't even call myself intersex. I had to have permission from the head leaders, at that time, if I was intersex or not. So it's a real interesting situation where Dr. Kerry Costello, he's an intersex trans professor at Wisconsin. He actually makes an argument with his blog that it could be as high as 1 in 150 have intersex traits. And that, I don't want to get into the weeds too much with that because I could go on forever. But no, seriously, if he is correct, this could give a lot of transgender people explanation, even as gay people explanation that's physiological.
I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand is how many ways there are to be intersex. The same kind of, there are so many ways to say sexuality and so many ways to love. It's not like, this specific thing happens and then you're slotted into this medicalized disordered kind of term, which is total nonsense. It can be anything from duplicate sets, or not duplicate sets, but multiple sets of like reproductive organs to hormone levels, and I'm wondering maybe if you can give us like a base starting definition of someone who is intersex, and then from there we can start talking about this hypothetical person and our meteor stuff.
Well, what I like to do is I first go a little bit into history. In the late 1800s were the invention of birth certificates. So at that time, people in power and control, the government, the medical complex, they determined that there would only be male man, female woman. What I like to offer people is the word endosex. So I'm not just teaching you about intersex. I now have given you a word to describe anybody that's not intersex. So you have endosex female variations, endosex male variations, and everything in between, the people in power and control, now pathologized as either a disorder, a syndrome, or in the case of transgender people, a mental illness. And gay was a mental illness all the way up until 1987, a year after I graduated high school. So everything in between is now mental illness, and even endosex LGBT people are being pathologized as mental illness up until the late 80s. So lots has changed. So one of the things I like to teach people is you could be intersex with your reproductive organs, your sex traits, your genitals, your hormones, and your chromosomes. It could be any variation of one or more. There are so many variations. The medical complex likes to pretend they could categorize them all. So I typically do not give you a number. I will not go into specific names because after working with Dr. Judy Herring as my colleague, I now know that it is literally impossible to mark down every variation out there, especially if Dr. Kerry Costello is correct about 1 in 150. So I like to stray away from those types of numbers, unlike some of my intersex friends or advocates. They like to talk about those numbers. I actually like to help transgender people to discover their sex traits. I'm kind of the gate opener, and where it's like, oh my God, Anunnaki just discovered another trans man that has polycystic ovaries. And are polycystic ovaries really a sex trait for that person if they want them to be? Absolutely.
It's and I feel this way also in any setting where I'm talking about gender. It can only get more complicated. That is the thought that I'm always left with in my head, whether you're talking about physiology or you know uh, characteristics in the body, or you're talking about who you are, mentally, consciously, identity wise. It only gets more complicated.
Well, and one of the ways that I try to help people is to like separate the two. You have your sex trait words, like I said, intersex female variations, intersex
Mhm,
male variations, the intersex variations in between. All of three of those can be assigned wrong at birth, so we can alter our sex. Obviously, the problem with intersex people is we're being altered with non-consenting as non-consenting children.
mhm,
However, people can alter and change their sex and become who they need to be. And then gender identity is man, boy, woman, girl, non-binary, transgender, transmasculine, gender fluid, gender queer, bigender,
yep.
trigender, demi-girl, demi-boy, tomboy, two-spirited. I mean, it goes on. Pangender,
Mhm.
multigender. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I think there's probably Judy likes to say it's like a fingerprint. It's as like all the stars in the
Mm,
universe. So,
mhm,
um, so you have your sex traits
mhm,
and your gender identity. Sex traits, physiology, gender identity in your brain and heart.
mhm. Um, One thing I often find myself wondering about is why is this something that wasn't told to me in my middle school puberty class, or in
Mhm.
sex ed. This is such a basic kind of information, right? What was the number you said? 134 million people,
Yeah.
and I there isn't a whisper of it in public schooling, or
Well, exactly. There's something called the Prater scale that
Mhm,
shows the variations of my form of intersex. It's not going to describe other people, but it will
mhm,
show the how fetal development shows the development of a clitoris all the way to a stand to pee penis and all the
mhm,
little stages in between.
mhm.
I didn't even see my first Prater scale until I was 46 with Dr. Judy Herring in my living room. I'm going to call her just Judy because she's a dear friend. Here I am living on that
Mhm.
scale. I've been to and from doctors. I've had over 19 surgeries. Not one doctor, not one counselor, no one ever showed me the Prater scale.
Do you think, and I feel like you have kind of two poles of um the ignorant, perhaps, I don't even know this exists, to I'm consciously leaving this out and there are reasons.
I
um
honestly believe that it is a people in power and control type problem,
mhm,
where you have the government and the majority of them are white conservative men, Christian men that are holding up a standard. I mean, it's hurt the indigenous people, it's hurt people of color, it's hurt intersex people. It's that same insidious power and control that erased everything that didn't fit their standard. And in my TED
mhm,
talk, I say it's a good argument for eugenics because my variation
mhm,
is actually one of the up there with Klinefelter, and I'm not going to say syndrome, I just say Klinefelter, and up there with Turner's. I don't say
mhm,
syndrome, I just say Turner's. And
mhm,
congenital adrenal hyperplasia, we're aborted at the rate of Down syndrome.
hmm.
Um, I was told by my United Kingdom activist friends that congenital adrenal hyperplasia isn't even being born anymore. I mean, that's beyond a good argument for eugenics. That is eugenics.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of articles. I'm obviously with informed consent. I believe in abortion. I'm not you
Mm-hmm.
know, not
Yeah.
like that. But at the same time, this is obviously not informed consent. If a if a genetic specialist is telling this couple your baby's going to have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, they're going to be salt wasting. However, they could have this amazing life. If they are 46XX, they're going to possibly have a prater. They're going to have a phallus. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
somewhere be in between there.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be amazing like Anunnaki. No, I'm just joking. Seriously, they're being told to abort. They're being told to abort. And so my passion, it's almost like a sacred contract more than
Mm-hmm.
than just a passion. It's like a sacred contract is to help save lives, to help save penises, to help save phalluses and phallic clitorises.
Yeah.
Seriously, that is truly my sacred contract. It's kind of funny.
I should have laughed. It was just safe
It's
penises.
it's absolutely heart crushing, how many people have been surgically violated, and this amazing sensational part that
Mm-hmm.
creates orgasm has been removed off of their body. That is the worst human rights violation that people. I mean, female genital mutilation. Everybody knows it's wrong, but yet we can legalize it and call it corrective surgery for a 46XX congenital adrenal hyperplasia child that's been assigned a girl and justify it.
Mm-hmm.
And now they can even do even more glamorous surgeries where they hide it or they bury it, and all sorts of horrible tortures are happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrific. What And I do get the people in power and control from Dr. Tiger DeVore. I could name that group differently, but I think I'll stick with that.
Mm-hmm. So when you say the people in power, is that and when allies, say such as myself, are thinking about like, who should I yell at? Is it hospitals? Is it doctors? Is it the people writing the textbooks for the doctors? Is it state legislature? Like, there are so many platforms, right, when we're talking about gross human rights violations that are happening to fight against them. Is there one platform that is more effective, would you say? Like, are doctors a little bit more reciprocal? Or is legislature like, oh, I can't step on this stuff, I'm going to back off?
I think some of these questions would be best for Interact to answer, Kimberly Zieselman. But from my own side of the street and understanding things, Dr. Judy Herring, again, Judy did explain to me how a lot of these surgeons are right-wing conservative surgeons that are doing these corrective surgeries. So their mindset is not going to be to salvage the body of a hermaphrodite. And I do use the word hermaphrodite in this case because that does adequately describe it. Obviously, we're not talking about having both sperm and eggs. So it would be pseudo hermaphrodite. But these are not liberal doctors that are thinking, oh my goodness, we need to think about bodily autonomy. We need to protect this child from all this mental torture that they're going to go through all their life. I'm not understanding why they've been harmed surgically. And then we could get into what happened to me. Like I said, up until a year after I graduated high school, gay was in the DSM as a mental illness. It wasn't until literally just 2019, a year after my birth certificate, that they dropped trans. The World Health Organization dropped trans as a mental illness. So here I am coming out, this very queer kid, and I did not have the luck of a liberal psychiatrist. I got locked up 3 times, month stays, going through conversion therapy. So Sharon Preeves, in her book, Intersex and the Contested Self, finally described what had happened to me. I was psychically mutilated. So you have the physical mutilations that we often hear about, intersex genital mutilation, IGM. And then we have psychic mutilation that happens to everyone pretty much when you're born intersex, especially if you're assigned wrong, because of that transphobia and that homophobia Oh
Yeah.
my God, my daughter is now saying they're my son, and now they're saying they're also gay. Wait a minute, that meant they were my daughter, because if you're heterosexual, this would just be so much easier. And all this confusion.
I think that leads us kind of really nicely into talking about some of the overlaps. And it's funny because we were talking earlier, and it's like, what do the two communities share in common, and what are some key differences? Um, and is there a difference in such that being out as a queer trans person, that's something that you can know, but I can't internally intuit my body makeup, right? Somebody has to tell me that. And so I suppose I kind of just want to switch us over a little bit to, you know, a lot of gender right now is conversations are being framed within the kind of a trans framework, because everybody is like, gender variance, trans, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like missing a very key step here.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm rambling a little bit, so please feel free to cut in.
The first place I want to go is, if the demographics are correct from Intersex Human Rights Australia, it's about 47% of the intersex community will identify as LGBTQ or non-binary in some way.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no accurate demographics, but so this is a guess.
Mm-hmm.
From what I have seen on social media with all my intersex friends, it is about 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have conservative, sometimes even right-wing intersex people that don't want nothing to do with Anunnaki adding the I to LGBTQ. It's like, what is he doing? And then you'll have, of course, we can be gay, we could be lesbian, we could be bi, we could be pansexual, we can identify as being trans. Here's the sticky part about the transgender thing. If you have a person that is intersex, that has been assigned wrong surgically, we never want to call that person trans unless for some reason they are owning that themselves. This person literally has had their body violated. Simply being assigned the wrong gender and going against it is not, in my opinion, a good definition of trans, because of what I just told you.
Yeah.
So when intersex is included into the conversation, everybody needs to pause. Would Pigeon Pagonis consider themselves trans? I do not believe they do. And they do go against their birth assignment. So we really need to listen with care, and we need to respect each other's self-determination.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people don't understand that they're, the same way all queer people are not liberal, or was it Loghouse Republicans, gay Republicans, and people wonder about, well, where is the line between trans and intersex? And I think a lot of people just be like, oh, well, that's like being born trans, and really don't understand that, no, you can still be cis. Or, if you're not, you can also be trans, but it's not
well, and again, my friend Kerry Costello, they actually created a word called ipsogender to explain somebody that doesn't have the configurations of a cis body, but agrees with their birth assignment. Because cis technically means you're in alignment.
Yeah.
That'd be like, for example, I would be ipsogender if I had continued to live as a girl and a woman. Because there's nothing cis about me. I do not look like a female. I'm intersex. So I really like that word ipsogender. It's not catching on though, because intersex is so rarely heard. But I think the other thing that I like to tell people is when you are wanting to include us in your conversations, include endosex cis. Don't just say cisgender. Say endosex and cis or intersex and cis, because then all of a sudden, wow, we're actually a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And when it comes to transgender being a word to describe an intersex person, that has to be a personal choice. I don't even think, I think even counselors could do harm with this one because it was automatically assumed when I went against my birth assignment that I had gender dysphoria. I ended up getting diagnosed with it in order to get my hormones. They claimed that insurance wouldn't cover it without that diagnosis. I was literally showing up with them thinking I'm simply a trans man. And I'm going to tell you, it was violating.
Yeah.
It was not right what happened. And that's why in my TED Talk, I said, I don't have gender dysphoria. And that's why I come with the word cultural dysphoria. It came from a conversation me and Judy were having. What do we call this when society is having such a hard time recognizing me as a man with an intersex body or recognizing any transgender person as being authentically a woman and authentically a man? It's cultural dysphoria.
Yeah. That's an amazing way to put it. One of the thematics that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit as well was normalizing intersex, and talking about the evolution of our understanding as a society, right? We won't go global just yet. Of how gender and sex works and how body works and how gender identity works. Do you think that with the advent of more visibility, of the intersex community, there's then a broadening understanding of gender, and so there would be like, I don't know, a renaissance of gender understanding and education?
I absolutely love the fact that more and more intersex people are coming out. Where I get a little anxious is when the wrong language is being used and we're conflating sex traits with gender identity. And even intersex people like myself are being told by a counselor. I was literally told that I would need all these surgeries to become a man. The WPATH standards of care helped millions of trans people, but at the same time, Tiger DeVore is like, you don't need all these surgeries. Just love yourself as an intersex person.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that surgery is bad. Surgery saves lives when you have informed consent and you're an adult. But at the same time, I think everybody needs to pause. Do we truly need surgery to exist? And what I want to read this quote that kind of goes along with what you were saying. It's
Please.
by the Queer Advocate. I love this quote. Why are so many against trans kids getting gender affirming care, yet in complete support of intersex kids getting non-consensual normalizing surgeries? It just shows that it has never been about the child's best interest. Rather, it is about upholding binary, cisnormative, heteronormative ideals. And I think there's your answer. That is our intersectionality there.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm as gay as they come. So
break out all the rainbows.
It was, no, seriously, it was 2015 was our first Pride Parade as a family. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was able to be a part of the rainbow, and I always knew I was a gay boy. And here I am being raised a girl. And it's like, oh, this just sucks.
No, you have is it 2 kids?
Yeah, we actually have 3. We have 2 biological kids, and then one's adopted. And I am a seahorse dad, since it's the boy seahorse or the dad that gives birth.
Yeah.
Kerry Costello, God bless him. I keep saying his name. He must think I love him, which I do. Kerry actually came up with the word gestational father, because
Mm.
he too had gave birth to his daughter,
Mhm.
and we're not women. We were never women.
Mhm.
So it was really nice to be able to change Mother's Day into Seahorse Day.
I love that. Seahorses completely as a creature and as a metaphor are underappreciated.
There's one on my wall even behind me.
Oh, I do see that. Um, so talking about normalizing intersection, right? Is
Mhm.
is is are we gonna have this evolution of our understanding of gender once we do kind of strip away cis and heteronormative understandings?
I truly in my heart believe, and people might disagree with me, and that's okay. I might evolve and disagree with myself in a few years. But at this moment in time,
Mhm.
I truly believe that if we keep conflating male with man and woman with female, intersex babies will continue to be harmed on the surgery tables.
Mhm.
And it's in my gut. It's like, please, we need to stop conflating those two. A woman can have a penis and love it and want it. A
Mhm.
intersex woman could keep their phalloclitoris and want it. And a intersex man with a vagina doesn't always want to get rid of it.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes we like our genitals just the way we were, and then at the same time, again, everybody's valid. If we do need surgeries, you're valid too.
Yeah.
But the informed consent part of this has to get the conflation of sex with gender out of the way.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I cannot imagine, even if I were to be born right now at Emory Hospital, one of the best hospitals in our country,
Mhm.
I could almost guarantee you I'm going to be assigned a female and a girl.
Mhm.
And it's 2021.
Mhm.
And God forbid, with all the amazing surgeries out there, unlike when I was born in 67, now my parents would be being told, you don't have to have a sexual minority. We could just chop this thing off, or we could hide it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I actually believe things would fare worse for me if I was born today.
Mhm. So talking about this evolution and how I'm really glad you actually brought up the W path system. Um, and I don't feel like you could talk about W path without bringing up what it was based on, the Harry Benjamin.
Mhm.
And I it is a topic close to my heart because it's something that I will get into debates with people about, because a lot of people do truly love the WPASS system. It's a disorder for and so we're going to code it this way for insurance and da da
Mhm.
da, but don't worry, you'll get all your surgeries. But by the way, if you're non-binary, you don't get A, B, or C. Um, and so I find so many friends of mine having to lie
Yeah.
or having to work around because of these myths that were encoded by the first Harry Benjamin system, where it was like you can't be gay and trans.
Mhm.
Those are or you can't be actually a man if you weren't playing with trucks from the moment you could pick something up.
It was actually because of that standard of care. I was very anxious when I came out at 46. I had to get a letter to get my hormones, just like any transgender person.
Mhm.
And I hadn't lived one day as a man when I showed up to my psychologist, PhD, that was going to write this letter. And to make things even worse, I showed up in pink.
I, pink was the color for dudes supposedly, like,
Exactly.
right?
I didn't
This
get the memo.
ugh. It's so frustrating to me.
I thought I'd blown it. I thought I'd blown it. I thought
Mm,
I blew my chances because I didn't perform. So I know that it's happening. People are having to perform in order to get their hormones or their surgeries that they desperately need in order
mhm,
to be comfortable in their bodies.
mhm.
My message to the world is also no body is shameful. Um, if I stand naked in front of people, I'm still a man, and I'm going to tell you, you're not going to see a male. You're going to see an intersex man.
Mhm.
And I'm not in the wrong body. I don't need surgeries. That doesn't make me better than people that do. It doesn't make, I truly do believe in self-determination and everybody's valid.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, I find it sometimes difficult in some circles to say that because they're like, wait a minute, then you're not really a man. And I've actually had
Mhm.
some gay men that are very binary into certain
Yeah.
genital configurations literally move away from me like they're going to get the Anunnaki cooties. When
They would be so lucky.
they find out I have a vagina and they move away from me like, oh my God, it's going to jump at you. No, no, it, we have a long ways to go. I think the binary really did a number on every one of us, including me,
Yeah.
convincing us had, all this, like it says, the cisnormative, heteronormative type of thinking. And again, the people in power and control that had a huge part in that. Our sex education didn't even teach us that a girl deserves to even orgasm when she's having sex. So why would they be talking about Anunnaki um, weird queer adolescence where I was not having a female adolescence? I'm going to tell you right now.
Mhm.
I was having something in between,
Mhm.
and I'm not gonna get into too much explicit detail, but I'm gonna tell you, sex ed miserably failed me.
I think
And
sex
so,
ed miserably failed kind of everyone though, which is what I find so astounding. But I want to go back to something
okay,
you were talking about earlier, and it kind of has to do with what we were talking about, kind of like when the intersex community isn't welcomed, right, and isn't seen as part of, say, the LGBT community. Um, how have you dealt with those experiences? And you talked a little bit personally, but in your own advocacy as well, say if you are mentoring someone, or if someone is like, I don't know what to do, I feel so invisible. um
I think this might shock people what I'm gonna say, but I actually had to educate myself how to behave in LGBT spaces. I
mm,
had to learn how to speak the language. I had to learn not to sound accidentally transphobic when I'm not. I
mm,
had to learn how to, because the language is different in many cases, and you have to remember, for 46 years I appeared a heterosexual intersex woman, so I had all that privilege. There was no gay parades, LGBTQ parades. There was no thinking about adding an I to LGBTQIA.
mm,
There was none of that. I I lived in a closet. Our family was in the closet. And
mm.
then when I came out, my husband got kicked out of the closet he didn't even know he was in. And so I think what I would tell people first, what type of intersex person are you? Are
Mm,
you LGBTQ, non binary? Are you going to want to be a part of this community? That's the first question. Because if
mhm,
you're going to be on the other side of things, then obviously you don't go to queer spaces.
mhm,
But I think as an intersex person, that was one of the things I had to do. I had to learn how people speak and how their language. And when it comes to being an intersex person coming into an LGBTQ space, sad to say it, the burden of being the educator was on me.
mhm,
I had to. I was the one teaching PFLAG about intersex there in Jacksonville, and thankfully, PFLAG National had me talk 2 times at 2 conventions. So I'm very honored that PFLAG has given me that platform. And
mhm,
now this year, I do believe it was Ori. I can't remember their name, but another intersex person has helped to PFLAG with their intersex movement to make PFLAG more inclusive this year. So I hope that answered your question.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I hate that my answer is telling people that the burden of it, all that was on me. Learning about it was on me. Being an educator was on me. You know, in the perfect world, a marginalized person should be able to go into a marginalized space and not have to do all that educating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of brings us roundabout to, you know, why we're actually talking today and celebrating Intersex Awareness Day. You know, we've talked about how it is by the people in power, taken out of the textbooks, and how it hasn't been brought into even today's conversation when we're talking about gender, because trans has taken such a large focus of you know, cis het people trying to re-understand that the world isn't binary.
And then I'll say Indosex cis hets.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to make that part of my vocabulary.
I'll call it Indosexism.
That's amazing.
That's, you know, there is a huge responsibility in adding the I. For one, we need to learn a different language in order to honor everybody. And then it's very important to, you know, educate ourselves, or for LGBTQ to educate themselves. And one of the ways that I suggest, it's really fast, it's really easy, it's the United Nations Intersex Fact Sheet. It's 2 pages. It teaches you all the language. You learn that, you'll never, on the most part, I should never say never, but on the most part, you'll never offend another intersex person. And then if you do add the I, don't do it just because it makes you feel warm and fuzzy. Actually read the United Nations Intersex Fact Sheet, and then remember that if you start to attract those intersex people to your organization, to realize WPATH is not safe, you need to guide them to interact, interconnect, Intersex and Faith, the organization, guide them to Intersex Justice Project if they're BIPOC, you know, to realize that there's different ways of looking at this. Like, no body is shameful is different than gender dysphoria. There's a big difference there. You don't want a child showing up at PFLAG that was assigned wrong, an intersex child, and then innocently the people there are saying the child has gender dysphoria. Ouch.
Yeah.
This kid might not be in the wrong body. They might be just fine. They just need to change their clothes.
Yeah.
You know, unlike me, where I wore pink. But never mind. But so you have Intersex Campaign for Equality, Intersex Justice Project, Interact, Interconnect, and you know, these things are necessary to remember. If you're adding that I, you need to be able to refer people. You need to be able to be a bridge maker to those safe circles. Otherwise, please don't even say it. Just drop it LGBTQ, say you're plus if you want to feel good. And don't say it. Don't say intersex if you don't want that responsibility. Just stop.
What would you say for people watching today who are wondering what kind of work that they can get involved? I know you listed a lot of great organizations, and obviously I feel very shamed. I'm going to the UN's website immediately after this and will read my 2 pages. But
print that thing out and plaster it around the world. No, I'm joking.
Hand it out on the corner. More education is always better. But yeah, I'm just wondering about, you know, what would you say to people who want to get in the struggle? You know, is education the first place?
Well, this is where it's nothing about us without us. So invite yourself into those spaces. I have a group beyond the binary gender nonconformists where intersex, cis, het questioning people are welcome to join. There's an awful lot of intersex, queer people, non-binary people, trans people. I mean, there's over 89 ways we've defined our gender identity in that group. It's amazing, this group. And then, of course, again, to refer people to Intersex Support for Parents. It's a closed Facebook group. We have Intersex Haven that's closed. Obviously, intersex people aren't allowed in these spaces because we need to be, some safe spaces. But I think it's important, if you want to be an ally, to warm up, to have a conversation with me. I'm on Facebook all the time. I don't bite too hard. No, seriously, I love educating. I love meeting new friends. As I get busier and busier and busier with my schoolwork, things might be a little different. But remember nothing about us without us. Use references from Interconnect and Interact and legitimate websites that use the right language. Be careful not to use the wrong language. If you're pathologizing, saying disorder, syndrome, red flag, you're using the wrong language. If you're saying even differences of sex development, we're trying to stray away from that now because every doctor, they just see DSD. They're saying disorder of sex development, no matter how many times we scream disorder is difference.
Yeah.
They don't care. So intersex bodily variations, intersex traits, intersex person. And then, of course, we could be a man, a woman, both or neither. And then we could be rainbow or we can be straight. So we're really like intersex people.
I think that's the biggest takeaway in a lot of ways, is that you thought there was a difference. It's just there's so many overlaps. I think that people really almost look for more ways to differentiate than to recognize the similarity that actually exists.
Well, and we have to learn to listen with care, because even in my own community, we're broken up into about 8 different groups. I'm not going to get into the weeds of each one, but there's a certain group part that does not like the word hermaphrodite. It's a slur, and to them, it truly is. It miscommunicates what they look like, who they are. It's totally off the mark. However, with me and Hida and a few others who are born on that Prater scale, we look like hermaphrodites. We might just have eggs. We might just have sperm. We're not true hermaphrodites, but we look like hermaphrodites and we want the word back. So we have to, honor everybody. Don't call an intersex person a hermaphrodite unless you know without a shadow of a doubt that's okay, because it's not okay with a good number, because I'm just going to say it, naked, they do not look anything but intersex. It could be their chromosomes or their hormones. They don't appear with the mixed genitals and the mixed sex traits. So we have to honor everyone. I hope I...
No, that was perfect. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm just catching myself on the time right now, and I'm seeing that we're getting a little bit down to the wire.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess I want to wrap up by thanking you for talking with me and having this conversation and letting me celebrate the day with you. I greatly enjoyed this, and I hope everyone watching also learned something and will take it into their life and continue to do amazing work like you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You've done so much for the community. I would be so amped to have you back whenever you wanted to talk again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I will go into our outro right now before we cross over after the hour. Thank you, Patrick.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for speaking with me, as well as thank you to everyone watching today's program. I feel so lucky to be part of the New Haven Pride Center and part of the team and participate in these incredibly important conversations. The center is here for you year round with dynamic programming, support services, case management, a gender affirming closet free for all to visit and take what you need. Performance, art exhibits. There's just so much. You can find out about all our upcoming programming at newhavenpridecenter.org. Which has a list of events on the left-hand side of the main page, which is just the calendar. If you're looking for more information and ways to connect, you can follow our social media at New Haven Pride Center on Facebook, at New Haven Pride Center on Instagram, and New Haven Pride on Twitter. Something to keep in mind, and I always want to stress this at the end of our conversations. If you missed an event or if you want to peruse our past panels, you can check out the center's YouTube channel. Everything is archived there and you can spend hours watching. That's YouTube /C/New Haven Pride Center. If you have any concerns, comments, questions, trans, non-binary, intersex programming, whether you're looking for resources, are a parent looking for some direction, or want to talk about possible trainings or workshops, please feel free to contact the center at info at New Haven Pride Center or myself at trans@newhavenpridecenter.org. Lastly, as a pro tip, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider joining as a member. It's free, and you can join at newhavenpridecenter.org/join now. If you're interested in supporting our work as we build community spaces and host more conversations and workshops and social spaces and direct services, please consider making a donation. It really, really helps us. It helps us continue to support our programming so we can pay our amazing speakers, such as yourself today. So we can continue building towards a brighter tomorrow. Thank you again so much for joining us today. And I hope you all have an amazing day and happy Intersex Awareness Day.
Yay.
Thank you.
Bye.